highly explosive press conference that I think people are either misinterpreting or missing altogether. Okay, we're going to talk about everything that's involved here, right? Not the least of which, Jerry Jones, just like we predicted, admitting that he was a liar. Jerry Jones also all but telling you, even despite Zeke being back, I know everybody's excited about that. Okay, we're going to be honest about that situation too. But despite that, a trade is coming. We're going to have a heart-to-heart about Deuce Vaughn. We're going to talk about Jerry mentioning all in again and why he's both right and wrong about that in regards to this draft. And then we're going to talk about the significance of each individual player from within this draft and what I think it means moving forward. Also wanted to refresh your memory on a highly polarizing topic that we haven't really touched on here in approximately 4 months. Bill Belichick. All that for you right now. Let's go. He's a friend, and I like him. And I want to make it real clear. I wouldn't have any problem working with him. So here's my question. If Jerry Jones is truly all in 2024, like most of us feel that he should be, then why is he already talking about the potential of hiring Bill Belichick in 2025? There's also this other narrative that I wanted to address really briefly here too, because it doesn't really deserve a ton of my time, but I'm still seeing it all over the social media streets for some odd reason. Okay, and that is the narrative of the Cowboys tanking. And I understand the frustration with their approach to the offseason, but let's just be honest and think about this logically right now. If they were actually tanking, they would have traded the quarterback already. No team, regardless of how good or bad they were the year before, regardless of how good or bad their offseason has gone, is actively trying to lose games in April or May now. But this narrative was happening even back in March. You can start tanking halfway through the season if some freak injuries happen and you start off 0-6 or 1-7, 2-5. Then you can start having that discussion. But in March, April, or May, nobody's tanking. All right, so this is the post-draft press conference here immediately following day 3. So the draft is wrapped up. Jerry, Steven, Will McClay, and Mike McCarthy are all sitting at the podium. This is the result. Let's start from the top. This first one here to me is really kind of the least explosive of the things that we're going to discuss, but it was at the beginning of the presser, and I think it's kind of important just for those who are curious or questioning whether or not Jerry is listening to you, the fan, and the media. Okay, this is your confirmation right here. Here we go.
We're going to block out the sun on the left side and have a strong side there on the offensive line.
Since you've been having to cover up all the holes of how we've messed it up for not being active in free agency, if you would kind of see how you think we've at least hit some edges of some holes.
That was Jerry's tongue-in-cheek way of kind of jabbing back at the media and all the fans who have let them have it, for lack of a better term, all offseason in regards to their free agency approach. So I actually found that entertaining. All right, this next one is when we really start to get into some of the explosivity within this presser here. So what you guys came for.
I've seen teams win the Super Bowl with running backs that they traded for in midseason. So the point is that this thing's a long way from being over as to how you're going to line up against X next fall.
Obviously occurs before Zeke was, made official. But to me, I think this deal was already done. I think, at this point, I think they knew that they were going to get that deal done, and he's still saying this. Okay, so the timeline can be a little bit confusing. Don't let that derail you from the actual words that he's saying here. He is paying attention to what we've all been saying as we first, as we introduced the show with. But then he's almost sort of doubling down, and you'll see we'll get to it again later. Steven all but says the same thing, just in a little bit. He words it a little bit differently, but he said essentially the same thing, that a trade is coming. The Zeke thing, right? Yes, there's a time and a place for the short down and distance conversion, the goal line conversion. That technically fills a need from your team, from your roster. You struggled last year to convert and to be powerful when you had to be powerful and actually move people off the line of scrimmage just to get 1, 2, 3 yards even. Okay. Zeke helps you there. All right. But who else helps you there too is Cooper Beebee. Actually being able to control A gap to A gap. When you put him in between a Hall of Famer to his right and an All-Pro to his left, a guy that's played that position for one full year, good things are probably going to happen. Okay, last year that wasn't the case, and we're going to get into why some of that is. You're going to hear them say it. It's going to all but confirm everything that we've been talking about on here this whole time. Your running game was more about the how in regards to the actual running backs succeeding themselves, right? Not so much the who at the running back position, but it was about the who up front. With one particular player that struggled with physicality and moving people. Okay, that's changing now. Whole point is, Zeke, time and place for some of the short down and distances. That's one. That's one plus. I'm all about him being brought in with mentorship in mind, helping some of these younger guys figure it out a little bit quicker, giving cues and, preservation, maintenance, understanding playbook, philosophy, helping Deuce Vaughn kind of take that next step, right? Help him get on the field. The heart-to-heart about Deuce Vaughn, that's coming. I think you guys are going to want to stick around for that because just some perspective for you on some things, okay? But if you're expecting Zeke to carry the load for one thing and to lead the backfield, temper expectations. You don't just turn back the clock just because you change your number. And that's another thing, too, that we have to kind of keep in mind here. You always have to ask yourself that question. Is this more of a marketing PR stunt or is it actually real? We're going to find out. The one thing with Zeke that, is almost a given. It's a guarantee, right? The vision and the contact balance are always going to be elite. Right? So that's a definite boost, just predicting the running game as we move forward and look towards 2024. But I still think that you're gonna go a lot further towards solving your deficiencies from a year ago by cleaning up some of the how, and then also just getting guys healthy up front, like Zach Martin and Terrence Steele getting healthy and 100% again. That's gonna do more damage for you, and then it matters less who's running behind that, if that makes sense, right? But with Zeke, he's the vision, the way, like I said, the way he sets people up, he's going to set up and overcome some things just by the savvy and the prowess that he's got. Like Okoye did a fantastic breakdown. I would highly encourage you to go check that out. Him on with Cowboys Beat. But teams are still going to respect Zeke enough and crowd the box a little bit more than they would have otherwise. And the interesting thing too is that the Ricos and the Zekes and the Royces of the world, they're all more of your downhill bruising style body types. Okay, so that's why I still think you need some of that home run ability to sort of complement that. And maybe Deuce Vaughn can be that guy. We'll see. You go from having to really leverage your way to the low man wins battle and try and tackle Zeke, Royce, Rico all day long. Then you got Deuce back there jitterbugging. It's a tough task for a defense. Okay, but for me, it's just as simple as what can you do to make teams respect your ability to run the football more? Crowd the box a little bit. Zeke saw a loaded box, I think 17% of the time last year. Tony Pollard only saw a loaded box 11% of the time. Teams didn't respect it as much. And the byproduct of that is what? Makes your job as a quarterback a lot more difficult when teams are sagging off and daring you to beat them through the air because they don't respect your ability to run it. And Dak still was able to overcome all that despite not having a run game. Still a top 3 offense in football. Okay, but the whole point of this segment here is the running back position as of today. If you're expecting Zeke to lead your backfield, Cowboys are already telling you that that's not going to be the case. All right, this next one here is stuff that you guys should already be very familiar with, especially if you've been following along to me closely. We're going to listen to Jerry mention how to have success in the postseason versus just in the regular season. Okay, and then I'm going to explain exactly what he's saying just to refresh your memory a little bit. Here we go.
Fits in real nicely with the overall thought of how we get better, how we go forward.
He's kind of cut it off a little bit at the beginning there. He's holding the paper, basically the draft sheet, the results of the draft, and he's saying, this right here fits how we get better with the overall. I'll let him continue.
And hopefully continue, in my mind, real success in the regular season and while addressing how to get better in the playoffs.
So this is going to be somewhat of an oversimplification, but They got more physical. Okay, that was clearly the MO. That was clearly getting tougher was clearly something that was pressing for not only Mike McCarthy, but for everyone. Okay, they finally realized what fans have been talking about for at least 2 years now. After the first, really after the, because if it happens once, it could be an anomaly, but it happened twice, 2 consecutive years in a row. You got bounced by San Fran, who was by far the more physical football team in both of those games, and then the same thing happened this year. Okay, so then it was like 3 times you're bordering on insanity. Okay, there's a lot to talk about with the defensive side of the ball in particular, but once again, in a nutshell, to keep a long story short, we know that the Cowboys were very one-dimensional, both sides of the football. Okay, I've called it the most one-dimensional playoff team that I've ever seen. All right, you cannot be one-dimensional in the postseason because good teams with good schemes and quality coaches will exploit your weakness. And if your weakness is actual weakness, you're in big trouble. You can't physically punch your way out of a wet paper sack. You've got a 205-pound linebacker playing off ball. Teams are going to exploit that. That's what the Buffalo Bills did. They laid the blueprint. We called it the blueprint, a team that didn't really love to run the football and didn't do so with as much physicality as they showed that day. Ran it 49 times for over 300 yards right down your throat. Inexplicable, right? So the whole point about this whole thing, and once again, I'll just go ahead and clear up this part too, why Jerry Jones is right and wrong at the exact same time when he says that this fits, is because it does fit. You did get a lot tougher, and we're going to discuss each individual player and why I say that. They accomplished that. Like on paper today, they would be able to line up and run the football better downhill, A-gap, between the A-gaps, going right at people than they did a year ago. They would have more success, okay? But the problem with this philosophy is, and that's some of the hesitation and the trepidation that I have with their approach to free agency. If you're calling on all your young guys carrying the mail, which Jerry Jones also mentions in this press conference, you're asking too much. Just think about what happened a year ago. I'm not ready to call any of those guys a bust yet, okay? And I've already explained that. I'm going to explain that again. But you got zero production from anybody in that draft. And we've already talked about, too, you cannot solve all of your problems when you lose as many guys as they did in free agency with one draft. It's such an imperfect science. You couldn't do it even if you did have the picks because you're just going to miss. You're going to miss on guys. You can't get in between the ears deep enough to really understand how guys are wired. But B, you don't have the picks. So it's not enough. Even if you were 100% on every single player that you select, it's not enough. Which brings me to the next point, okay? The physicality is what everybody's going to talk about, and rightfully so. Okay, that's what you can see on film, what you can very easily connect the dots between where the Cowboys were a year ago and where they're looking to be a year from now, or towards the end of this season, right? Physicality is not the most important trait here to think about. It's the way that these guys are wired to go along with and parlay that with physicality. Being physical is one thing, but do you love football? Do you care enough to do all the dirty work, to take care of your body, to be in the film room, to not mess up because you're behind the 8 ball and you're too busy, your mind's in a million other places? How much do you love football? Will McClay mentioned that today. Mike McCarthy mentioned that today. Stephen Jones, and I think, mentioned that today. And I think I've got at least 2 timestamps written down that I'm going to show you and prove that to you. But also, another guy that said that 4 months ago was this guy right here. Forgive me if that speculation is reckless. And also keep in mind that it absolutely does not apply to everybody in that building. But the tape and the effort from yesterday's game definitely won't disagree. Moral of the story is, and once again, based on my own experience in professional sports, different players are in it for different reasons. I think there's some serious soul searching that has to happen. And in my own personal opinion, the organization from the top down must relentlessly prioritize the intangibles in their player evals and in their coaches as well. The 2 most important traits that the Cowboys are going to have to spend extra time and due diligence focusing on this offseason in order to get better if they really want to do that, if they're serious about it. Physicality and guys who love football. This next one, we're going to go ahead and clear up the Deuce Vaughn heart-to-heart that I've been teasing for a while now. And it, to me, it's part of the whole guys who love football thing, okay? As a former professional athlete, I learned that talent can only take you so far, right? I wasn't the most overly talented guy. Otherwise, I wouldn't have even been in the position that I was in. But you see so much talent just get wasted because guys, they just fall out of love with the sport. They're not disciplined enough to continue showing up and doing all the dirty work when it gets hard, right? They don't love the process. Okay, so that's why you have to find guys, first and foremost, the most important trait. You know, we always talk about this for quarterbacks, right? It's the trait that you can't physically measure because it's between the ears. That's always the most important. And that's why I'm always, I try to be outspoken in that regard and getting people to understand and appreciate the human element of sports. So like the sports psychology side that so way too often, I would argue, gets overlooked, okay? But we're going to listen to what Mike McCarthy says. It's going to give you some context about why Deuce struggled, okay? And then I'm going to explain to you why not only is it crazy to be writing off, people are writing off pretty much everybody in last year's class, which is nuts. But to write off Deuce in particular, and Mazi also fits in the same category. I've got a lot of passionate thoughts about him too. Maybe we can touch on that if I don't forget. But Deuce Vaughn, listen to Mike McCarthy kind of explain to you what was going on last year. Here we go.
It's a young group, but they all have upside. So I like our group. I mean, adding Royce was a really good addition for us. He's a proven player, but he's also a proven special teams player. So, Rico's healthy. You got Deuce and you got Hunter, and then also let's not forget about Malik. So you have players that are all they're going to be here. The younger guys 2+ years, and we'll be. I think they'll be better in the second year in the offense. Just some of the things that we've changed and adjusted coming from year 1 to year 2. Because as I sat here last year, we put a lot more responsibility on our running backs, just with the new protection scheme that we added and so forth, and all those guys, took a big jump. So I feel really good about where we are today, and as Steven's already stated, I mean it's not over.
But it's not over. Once again, teasing the whole adding another running back to the room thing. Okay, that's one. Secondly, what I want y'all to pay very close attention to, what's important here. He mentioned Royce Freeman's name first, technically. Before Zeke, he is the elder statesman of the members in that room. But if we also acknowledge that he mentioned special teams alongside Royce Freeman's name, Deuce was mentioned second. A little wordplay irony there too. Interesting. Okay. But Deuce was mentioned second after Rico. And then he mentioned Hunter. Then he mentioned Malik. Okay, I also thought that was interesting. But now, the key part here, part number 3. He just told you that last year they were basically overhauling their protection scheme, meaning the pass protection, the responsibilities from the running backs. Okay, now I'm going to read you a tweet that I made because I'm going to read it to you because I don't think I can say it as well as I typed it up here and convey the message that I'm trying to say. I'll get off on a tangent. So I'm just going to read it to you, and then we're going to tie that in, okay? Still have this weird feeling about Deuce Vaughn that I can't shake. Something in me still says he's going to have a big impact on this team. It just doesn't make sense in my head to write off a kid who led the nation in all-purpose yards after just one season in the league. Almost like the father-son poetic storyline made the expectations from this fan base much bigger than they ever should have been. I firmly believe that too, by the way. Obviously, or else I wouldn't be writing it, but nonetheless, here we go. And now a bunch of impatient people who are unfamiliar with the adversity associated with any player in any sport have completely overreacted. Once again, referring to the sports psychology. Maybe I'm wrong, but just remember, one season of adversity off of the active roster ain't expletive for a kid who's quite literally been overlooked his entire life. Okay? And we'll continue with this part right here and put a bow on it. Allow me to challenge your perspective for a second. Mike McCarthy, in the Cowboys post-draft presser, like we just talked about, acknowledged that they revamped their pass protection scheme and their protocol for the running backs. So my guess is, in the case for Deuce Vaughn, the whole revamp was a foreign language and became another hurdle, yet an extra hurdle for a kid whose small stature already made pass protection very complicated in the first place. That's significant because, one, they were already attempting to overhaul a significant portion of their offense, and two, overhauling that protection scheme while also overhauling their offense means that there wasn't enough time, energy, and effort spent on actually having a proper plan for Deuce Vaughn. Remember, it's not the who in the run game, it's the how. I hope that registers and resonates well with you all, and please let me know your thoughts, because I think that's one of the more explosive things that we're going to talk about today, but there's still quite a bit more. So let's continue. All right, this next one is something that I already kind of touched on a little bit, but I'm going to play the audio so you guys can hear it, and then I'll just kind of sum that up once again too. Okay, it's Jerry Jones mentioning all in again.
Before we start talking, I know, Stephen, you said no time that people will scrutinize you, criticize you until you guys get it done in December. And you're able to take the next step in the playoffs. Based on what you've done in the draft and free agency, how much better positioned are you to take that next step now? Jerry,
Go ahead. I thought you were asking Stephen. This is all in, Clarence.
When he said that, he was once again showing and referring to the draft paper with the names that they acquired this year on it.
I think that relatively we have given ourselves a chance to be better at the end of next year.
I mentioned him referring to them being better at the end of next year. He's right, because they are going to, like, physically on paper, more adequately equipped to not be exploited the way that they were against the Bills, against the Packers, and against the Niners. Right. So he's right there in that regard. They are actively addressing their biggest weakness, right? They're going to give their quarterback some help by being able to run the football. But where he's wrong at the same time is that if you're expecting a bunch of rookies to carry that mail for you, you're in for it. Because the reality is, we know already, not all these guys are going to be able to pan out the way that they want it to, and the way that they ideally would, maybe a year or two down the road, once they get acclimated to the big boy league. It's not going to happen. You're not going to be perfect. So tread lightly. Okay. And once again, why that's important, if I haven't been clear enough, and stop me if you've heard me say this 8 times on this channel already, maybe even more than that, actually. The cap casualty players, the veterans that are inevitably going to get cut, as they do every single year immediately after the draft, once teams have a better feel for the depth on their roster and for the cap as well, what they look like financially, are going to get cut. Example, Michael Gallup, post June 1 cut. Cowboys shed a veteran caliber player to save a little bit of money and spread it out over the course of 2 seasons on the cap as opposed to just 1. Guys start to get cut now. Those dominoes are already falling. Zay Jones is one of the examples that I've touched on. More are coming. But on the defensive side of the ball, where it's key for this team to sort of minimize the learning curve of the new defense in Mike Zimmer's scheme, right? Getting Eric Kendricks was huge there. It's a huge start because he understands the defense. You now have a green dot guy that can help sort of be the coach on the field and bring everybody along with him, right? But those cap casualties, those dominoes, right? That dead horse that I've been kicking all along, telling y'all, look, like the team building part of this, it's not done yet. The Cowboys are going to do that because they want to save their comp picks from the guys that they lost in free agency this year. When you add guys to your roster from the veteran free agency market, right? Whoever that player may be, if they're not on an expiring contract, once again, i.e. Eric Kendricks, who was cut. Okay, if a guy gets cut and then you sign him, he does not have any effect, regardless of how big or small the contract is, on next year's comp picks that the league grants you for losing quality free agency players like Tyron Smith, Dorrance Armstrong, Tyler Biadisz, and I forget who the fourth one is, Tony Pollard. So they're likely going to have 4 picks already next year on top of the other ones that they're going to have, that every team gets, right? And we've already known they've teased that they're going to be, they teased the term trade on here 3 times. So we know that's in the wheelhouse. They did it last year, trading for Stephon Gilmore and Brandon Cooks, getting two veteran and savvy football players into the room, helping you, similar to the whole Zeke thing, the mentorship part of it, right? But also being able to impact your team competitively. They did that last year. I thought that was a right step, which is why I kind of maybe I jumped the gun a little bit, but I got excited because to me that, alongside a couple other things, signified philosophical change for the organization. Right, bringing Mike McCarthy in, letting him bring in his guys, and not just force feeding him, hey, here's Kellen Moore, that whole thing, and trading for those veteran players like they did last year, separating themselves from the sentimental value of players like Zeke, who they cut. That was the right decision at the time. Okay, and Tyron Smith, asking him to take a pay cut, which he did. Still don't agree with letting him go this year in free agency, but it is what it is. Okay, let's move on. And actually, while we're here, one last thing. Jerry Jones, this is him direct where I mentioned carrying the mail earlier. Here's him saying exactly that.
Young players with their first, second, third-year guys, they've got to start carrying the mail for the Cowboys.
Much to be determined here. Now, let's have some more fun with this next one. Okay, this is where Jerry Jones pretty much admits that he was a liar, just like we predicted and teased, 3 months ago, however long it was. Is Jerry lying right through his teeth when he says that the Cowboys will be, quote, all in 2024? It seems to me like he is, and I'm about to prove it to you right here. Check this out.
Vaughn. And we are not compromised because of cap, as much as I implied that it way in terms of handicapping.
You don't say.
We're in a situation where these young players with their first, second, third-year guys, they've got to start carrying the mail for the Cowboys.
Let's run it back one more time.
Church-wide. And we are not compromised because of cap, as much as I implied that it way in terms of handicapping.
You don't say, Jerry. What's our motto on here, man? The salary cap is real tomorrow. You're always going to have to pay for it, kick the can down the road in the future. Okay? It ain't real today. You can manipulate it however you want. It's much more of an accounting principle, emphasis on those two words, than it is any sort of cap or ceiling on the way you want to go about structuring your team and team building. Another analogy that I use, I often refer to the Cowboys' philosophy in terms of team building, is they're like a bodybuilder. There's three separate phases. There's the trade market, there's the free agency market, and there's the draft market. Okay, there's really three ways to do it. Okay, they're the bodybuilder that skips back and chest day, or leg and back day, or whatever they're trying to go about it for the most part, and by doing one of the three most important and key phases to team building. It's fine. I mean, draft and develop is great, but the whole problem is identifying first the guys who are wired the right way is almost impossible. Still, it's getting better. There's technologies now. The Wonderlic test has been around for years, but the S2 cognition test, I've mentioned that before, that I devoted an entire project to the significance of that and why that could potentially be changing the game. The Cowboys are one of the 14 teams at the time, this time a year ago, who had a contract with S2, which is simply, it's a simulation of your ability to process and handle lots of different information. It's kind of testing your brain power and your reaction time. Let me know what y'all think about that. Okay, let's move on. I told you guys I'd show you at least one or two examples of everybody up on that stage really referring to the guys that are wired the right way. And why I was also, I said this guy was one of the ones that was also saying that 3 months ago. Here's the first example.
I don't know how much film you've seen on him. I mean, this guy's a hell of an interior football player, and I know he's played every position at K-State. I just love his play style, and then our scouts do a tremendous job of getting to know these young men and seeing how they're wired, and you get a lot of postseason information, and everybody you talk to thinks it's a no-brainer for him to go in there and play full time, because he has played center in his college career.
Seeing how they're wired is the key there. That's what I love hearing. This next one is a much more below the surface approach just to everything that's kind of happening, like me digging very deep here and trying to convey objective but also rational thinking and apply that to this team in this offseason. Okay. Here is Jerry Jones referencing when the conversation was about this year's draft class and the physicality, right? And the guys that are wired the right way. But Jerry Jones kind of agrees, and then he doubles down and says that he calls it blue collar and says that Mike McCarthy was the catalyst to that, which signifies to me that he had a much bigger hand in this draft process than a lot of people were willing to admit or give him credit for beforehand. Okay. There were some people that thought I was a little bit crazy and a little bit wacky for suggesting that even despite him being on a 1-year contract, that they would give him enough of a say in the war room to really be all in and try to do this one more time. This is telling. Here we go.
Nick Harris, DallasCowboys.com. This can go for anybody, whether it be Tyler Guyton having to burn himself at tackle at Oklahoma.
Nick Harris from DallasCowboys.com, by the way. I love his work, and I love his ability to craft questions respectfully, but in a way that really does generate thought-provoking answers from the 4 men sitting at that table right now. So, Nick, if you're seeing this, man, keep up the great work.
Marshawn Kneeland, Ryan Flournoy having to kind of earn their marks at smaller schools. It seems like there's a blue-collar mentality around this draft class. Is that something that you guys kind of sought out this year specifically, or just kind of unfolded that way?
I think our coach has got a lot of blue collar in him, and in that sense, and so his personality, I think, kind of permeates what you're talking about here in this draft. And I know that the word that I kept, I sat right beside him, and he kept reminding me of the big boys on the defense and the division, and he kept talking about we just need that's why he likes Beebee so much. We just need to get in here and have some more in the dirt footballs to use it there.
And if you're paying close enough attention to the culmination of all of that, the last few clips and things that we've seen, that was a subtle shot at the center from a year ago, Tyler Biadisz. And I hate to say his name is in slander form, right? As if I'm sort of trying to discredit him or not appreciate the work that he did. It's a 4th-round pick, like I've already touched on before. It's a 4th-round pick that, granted, not only did he receive a second contract, the contract extension, after your rookie deal expires, you get a new one. That's really what all guys are striving towards, generational wealth. Not only did he do that, he also he outperformed his draft stock so well that he is actually giving the Cowboys back, as of right now, a 4th or 5th round comp pick because of the contract that he received in free agency. So this is a dude that's busted his ass to get to where he's at. And I don't want to take anything away from him, just for this particular team that sort of, at least especially last year, lacked the scheme to get really creative with their running game because, like Mike McCarthy said, they were changing a lot of things. It's tough to do all that in year one. He wasn't physically just like, the Lord didn't bless him with the DNA and the genetics to be the 330-pound people mover that Cooper Beebee is. When you don't have the run scheme, for a variety of reasons that I'll spare you guys the nuances of those particular details, you can find those on my YouTube channel tomorrow. When you don't have the run scheme to offset your lack of physicality, you're handicapped. Okay, so not only are they all but alluding to his strength handicapping them, but Mike McCarthy also pretty much told you who the starter is going to be. Okay, and that's another thing too. We're going to talk about the physicality, but I'm going to put that into perspective for you and contextualize the actual sheer size difference from Cowboys of years past, Cowboys of this draft. Okay, stay tuned. But Mike McCarthy talking about the blue collar nature, Jerry Jones doubling down, saying that that's how their coach is, which is a compliment, a huge compliment. But Mike reminding Jerry and Steven in the war room about who you're going to be playing against. Like, what are the strengths of your opponents on defense? And really just in general. The guys that are in your division. And I hear Vaughn talk about this all the time too. And he's so spot on with it. You're seeing Jalen Carter. And last year it was Fletcher Cox and Jordan Davis, and the year before that with the Eagles it was Javon Hargrave. But now Javon Hargrave is with the Niners, and they've got Eric Armstead over there, and all 12 first-round picks it seems like on their defensive line. But it's mostly it's the interior guys in your division that are the strength on defense, right? Deron Payne from Washington, Dexter Lawrence, and even before that they had the dynamic duo of Leonard Williams over there too. You're going to play that first round schedule or that division champ schedule this year because you won the division last year. Your schedule's going to be tougher. You're going to see all those teams. And, the North Star, the teams that you're chasing in the NFC, all have one thing in common relative to you, and that's that they are more physical. This next clip here, I'm not sure, but I think this is Mike McCarthy's respectful way of taking a subtle shot at not only the previous regime, DQ, for instance, but also the Joneses themselves. Listen to this.
Our young guys have played early, maybe played a little earlier than most of the teams I've coached. So
played a little bit earlier than most of the teams I've coached, and that once again that speaks to what we talked about the whole bodybuilding reference from a little bit ago. Okay. Because they rely and focus so much on drafting and developing, and depending that's the it's every team's foundation is the draft, obviously, but they don't supplement it enough with other the trade market and the free agency market. Their young guys do play because they have to. That's what he's saying here.
I think that last year's class will definitely take that jump, and I think also that we talked about the three young men that have been on injury reserve. I mean, and you got to remember, we get to watch these guys come in here every day and go through rehab. Watch them work on the field with Britt Brown and so forth. So those are those extra players that we're excited about.
And this next one, once again, more emphasis on getting bigger, getting more physical. You're hearing them allude to Dan Quinn's philosophy. For those who still don't understand what happened, because I understand a lot of people after the season ends, especially the way that it ended this year, you check out for a little bit and you take some time off, and not everybody just has the time, energy, or effort or want to really deep dive and figure out what exactly is happening, what happened, and what's going on. And that's where me and dozens of others like me, that's how we make our living. Okay, so I appreciate that, actually. The Cowboys were a pass-stopping defense, not a run-stopping defense. And it was the structure, the foundation of who they were, quite literally down to, or keeping it as simple as being light in the ass. If a team wanted to just say, okay, well, this is what they do well, even if it's not what we necessarily do, which is run the football, i.e. the Bills, we're going to do it 50 times on you anyways, just because we know that you can't stop us, because you're not physically capable of doing it. You're not big enough. That's exactly what happened. That's exactly why you got bounced. Okay, your quarterback, regardless of how good he played against the Packers that day, wasn't going to matter. Defense couldn't get a stop because Green Bay stuck to their approach. They committed to the Cowboys' weakness, and they ran downhill at them all day long. There was nothing they could do. Context. Okay, so I actually did have it. It's the very next one. I just looked at it. So right back on track here. The next clip you're going to see, Jerry steps in to blatantly say, yeah, Mazi certainly will be better next year. And then Mike McCarthy doubles down on that and says, yes, lessons to be learned. Just check this out right here. Okay. Good stuff.
Son Yusuf, The Athletic. Jerry, at the Senior Bowl, you mentioned that you singled out the rush offense and run defense as two areas you guys wanted to improve this offseason. How do you assess those two areas now with the draft folks?
Well, we got bigger in both, and maybe the most important part of the run.
Fast forward that to 23-10. We've already seen that.
Yeah, I do want to have more big boys up front.
And, Will, you mentioned Justin Rogers, but defensive tackle, is there more? Is it Mazi Smith taking the next step? I mean, how do you guys see defensive tackle, and what were you guys looking at in the draft in terms of addressing that?
I'll let Mike do that one on it, but I can speak to you from 1,000 feet up or 5,000 feet up. Yeah, Mazi's got to do a lot better than he did last year, and I think he certainly will.
So, real quick, that question was directed at Will McClay and at Mike. Jerry steps in and says, before they answer, I'm going to let them answer, but I'm going to tell you right now that Mazi is going to be better than he was last year. That's because he's not going to be asked. Microphone switch. Thanks for bearing with me, y'all. He's not going to be asked to go from the 330-pound true one technique run stopping body type that he was drafted to be, to lose 40 pounds and become an up-the-field penetrating pass rusher, while he's also simultaneously acclimating to the NFL. Just crazy of an ask. But that was, in my opinion, Jerry's reference to DQ cultivating that. And then here's Mike saying the lessons to be learned part, which once again I think is referencing the old regime. Okay, just leave it at that. Here we go.
A young man going through the first year, and yeah, definitely. I think Mazi's an example of a young man going through the first year, and every rookie season is different, and there's lessons to be learned. And yeah, we're all kind of on Mazi to take the next step. Most importantly, he believes it. So,
y'all sensing? I hope y'all are understanding and processing like everything that's actually being said here, because like I said, this is explosive stuff here. All right, and here, once again, here's Will McClay. It's the second of at least 3 times they referenced guys being wired the right way and really loving football. Here's Will McClay's answer.
Get our chance to spend time with them, and if those things match, and then the external people that talk to them. So you try and match all of that information together to figure out who the guy is as best you can. We really won't know till we get them in here, but we want to have a good enough basis to know if they love football, if they'll work hard enough, and if it's important to them.
Do they love football? Are they going to work hard enough? Is it important to them? That's what the 30 visits are all about. That's what all the information gathering from literally the time that these guys jump on their radar. That's what they're trying to find out. And it's really cool to hear them emphasize that. I think, every team is sort of aware of that being important, but too many teams too often are betting on traits and things that you can physically measure. Not enough time is spent on the stuff that you can't actually see. Major key. There's a couple other things that I have written down, but I'm just going to sum it up for you. It's Stephen Jones candidly referencing, poking away on his phone and saying, yeah, we're looking for some more veteran guys here, talking about bringing other guys in. And it was plural. Okay. So not just Zeke, if you were inferring that from what he said there. And then Jerry Jones, once again, mentioning trades, actually let's do that real quick. The subtle shot once again at the old regime. I don't want y'all to assume that I'm clickbaiting you here, because I couldn't be further from the truth. Here we go.
With a little turnover on our staff, we've got guys who, with Zim coming in and Dan going out, there's a little difference in philosophy, and they like their guys, and we like now maybe a little different type of guy.
Little difference in philosophy. Yeah, he was being nice, but there's a big difference in philosophy. And that's very evident by the players in this draft that we're going to talk about real quick. Why is Tyler Guyton important to me? Number one, you guys already know, because it allows Tyler Smith, the All-Pro, who's played left guard really 1 year, to stay exactly where he is already, where he's already an All-Pro. Leave him there. Number two, about Tyler Guyton. Talking about Tyler Guyton here. 6'8", 330. People that big ain't supposed to move as athletically as he moves. Okay. There's one thing the Cowboys get right, as often or more than any other team in the league. It's the offensive lineman that they take in round 1. Who am I to judge? Okay. Get him in the hands of Duke Manyweather. There's just some technical refinement that needs to happen with Tyler Guyton here. But you listen to the people, some of the things that people are saying over from OU side of things. They're like, yeah, this is a rare character here. A dude, we're not sure if we've seen a guy with as much raw ability as this dude has. Okay. He was recruited as a defensive lineman. You know, he played some tight end in high school, I think. This guy, the ceiling is the sky with this guy. Next one, Marshawn Kneeland. Most people didn't know who this guy was, where he came from. All you have to know is this: ready-made NFL strength and run stop ability. Tailor-made. And Will McClay also in this press conference here too, directly comped him to none other than DeMarcus Lawrence, who still, even the last 2 years now, been one of the highest graded, I think 2 years ago, 2022, highest graded run stopping edge in the game. And then this past year, he was still top 5 in that same category. Okay. Teams will run at, if they have the choice, they're running at Micah Parsons' side every single time before they run at D-Law. He'll set that edge, he'll shed, stack and shed, and he'll make the play. Not always the case with Micah, who's still, he's kind of separating himself from the lion hunt quarterback mentality, right? Getting upfield too quickly sometimes, okay? Marshawn Kneeland immediately solves run stop, which you couldn't do last year. You get bigger, 280 pounds, really. I heard Vaughn ask the question, were Chris Braswell and Marshawn Kneeland, and I guess Darius Robinson and Marshawn Kneeland, the only two guys that the Cowboys were considering because of their sheer physical size and run stop ability at the edge position? I think not only is it evident, I think it's very likely actually that might be the case. Okay. Also, on top of that, and maybe even more importantly, this is sort of a nuanced parlay here with Marshawn Kneeland, something that we touched on in the pre-draft preview with Ben Larimore. Edge was a sneaky need because, for me especially, because I've been very outspoken, as have a few other of my peers in this Cowboys content space. Micah Parsons playing more off ball and in the middle of the field. I don't care what side of the argument that you stand on. You cannot convince me that when you see that, you don't at the very least want to see a little bit more of it. Like, that's alien is not okay. You have to have somebody that can spell you, be physical. That, if a team like the Bills wants to say, "Hey, we're not gonna let Micah Parsons sack Josh Allen today. Josh Allen's only going to complete 7 passes. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to let James Cook run the football 49 times, and we're going to go right down your throat." What Dan Quinn should have done last year was, try to adjust and put Micah off ball. But, now what they'll have the ability to do in the future is say, okay, let's play chess. We'll put Marshawn Kneeland out there opposite of D-Law, and then we'll let Micah pursue the ball carrier from the second level and from the middle of the field, where he can still blitz from, which most people just, in my head, naively overlook when they refer, or when we're having the discussion of should Micah Parsons play a little bit more linebacker. He absolutely should, but it's less black and white and more so let's move our elite level chess piece all across the formation so that you can't scheme him out of the game. That's what Marshawn Kneeland does. Number 3, Cooper Beebee. This one's really simple for me. You are tougher. You are smarter. You are more physical up front. He now gets to play in between a Hall of Famer and an All-Pro, and you are going to be able to go downhill and move people, period. And the rest of these guys, it's more of the same. Marist Liufau, the linebacker out of Notre Dame, but a lot of people would have preferred Peyton Wilson there, myself included. Ben told you that he had him actually as one of his highest overall graded players in the draft. The Cowboys elected to pass on him, eliminate the contingency of the injury being a factor from their draft here, and then which I respect in some cases. Let's see how that one pans out. But the one thing that you can say unequivocally about Marist Liufau, and the same exact thing can be said about Peyton Wilson here too. They share the same trait, and that is hair on fire, 100% every single snap. Love football. Marist is a classic example of that. Caelon Carson, especially, this is a physical dude that wants to help you in the run department, but also has the instincts to cover. Even some impressive ball skills there. The Cowboys had him in day 2 on their draft board. He was a day 2 grade for them. They couldn't believe that he fell where he did in round 5. So that should tell you all you need to know about that player. Ryan Flournoy, same thing. 6'2", 205, very fast. That's huge at the receiver position. You know, I mean, it's not huge, but it's well above average at that spot. And to still be able to run that fast, the traits and the physicality are exactly what the Cowboys are after here. They're betting on traits down this low. Had he not been at Southeast Missouri State, you know, a D1, but football championship subdivision, an FCS school, had he been in the FBS and as opposed to the FCS, he's probably a day 2 pick, just off the measurables and the traits alone. And, you know, the competition is the knock here, okay? But once again, physicality. And the last 2 guys here, Nathan Thomas, tackle out of Louisiana, 6'4", 330. Okay. The body types. This is what I told you guys I was going to reference earlier if I remembered, okay? Josh Ball, Matt Waletzko, Chuma Edoga, Brock Hoffman even, you know, Tyler Biadisz. All those guys are 300 to 305 pounds, really. Tyler Guyton, Nathan Thomas, Cooper Beebee, Tyler Smith. All these guys are 330. Talk about philosophical change. Case in point, right there. That speaks for itself, if you ask me. Same to be said for the last draft pick that we're going to cover here, Justin Rogers. 7th round out of Auburn, defensive tackle, 330 pounds. Mazi Smith was the only guy on the roster after you let Jonathan Hankins walk who had played for you this past year that even remotely resembled that body frame. 330 pounds, that's a one-tech body. Mike Zimmer needs some big boys to plug the middle so that you don't let what happened to you against the Niners and the Bills and the Packers happen again in 2024. That's it right there. And the last guy that we're going to talk about that people have since salivated over in the UDFA market, right, since the draft came to a conclusion, that's Brevin Spanford, the tight end out of Minnesota. Okay, and if you were tapped in with us before the draft, when Ben and I went live the Wednesday before the draft began, we did our first and only mock draft of the year. Our 7th round selection was none other than Brevin Spanford.
I'd go Spanford here in the hopes of having another beefy tight end that can run block, and then take our pick from the rest of this list on the next one.
Say less, dude. I mean, you know where my head's at. You don't have to say anything else. If you tell me he can run block, he can help you move the line of scrimmage up front. Why? And I can't take any of the credit for this one. Also, I want to make sure that that's clear. Ben had him as the highest graded run blocking tight end in the entire class. Can you come in and help us up front move people so that we can control the line of scrimmage in the postseason when it matters and actually run the football and actually help our quarterback out? And not just depend solely on him and him alone. Both sides of the ball. If you don't have a lead, your defense can't play because they can't stop the run. That's what this is about. That's what Brevin Spanford is about. Jake Ferguson, great as he is, love him. 6'5", 245. He's a weapon, but he's not necessarily a people mover. Okay, maybe that aspect of his game will continue to grow. The pass catching element, we already know that's there. He's elite in that regard. So we got Jake Ferguson, 6'5", 245. Dalton Schultz, before him, 6'5", 244. Peyton Hendershot, 6'4", 250. John Stevens, 6'5", 215. Luke Schoonmaker, 6'5", 249. You know how big Brevin Spanford is? 6'7", 260. Ben was all over this one. And as a result, I was very excited about the concept of it too. We were kind of made fun of for it. We had some people poking at us on Twitter a little bit, but hey, guess what? This guy, undrafted free agent, we know UDFAs make the roster on this team. And once again, it plays on the fact that they depend mostly on one of the 3 main phases of team building that I've already touched on twice. He's going to make the roster, and he's going to play. Hope you guys enjoyed listening to this as much as I enjoyed making it. And I'm sorry that it took a little bit longer than I anticipated. I'm working on getting better. And thank you again to everybody who, like I said, contributed and came through for me and stepped up when I asked for a little bit of help, something I never do. afforded me the ability, as you just saw there, the new microphone, the new camera here. But most importantly, that's going to make my process a lot easier in terms of editing, right? I told you I want to spend more time conveying my thoughts in an engaging and interactive way and less time actually editing them. This bad boy right here is going to allow me to do that. Okay. This is going to continue to get better. The product will continue to improve, but from the bottom of my heart, man, thank you guys so much for your continued and unwavering support of me and of this process and of this channel. All the money that you've sent to me and will continue to send to me will go directly to this and give fans who deserve it, passionate people like yourselves, the truth about their team that they deserve, but that they don't get nearly often enough. So thank you. If you enjoyed this, like I said, as much as I enjoyed making it, let me know in the comments by simply typing in one word. You can say explosive. Sure. Type in explosive. That'll let me know that you're a real one. And I want to know who the real ones are. So talk to you guys soon.